My presentation is on navigating the Kundalini experience. I'm going to talk about the different altered states experienced in Kundalini awakenings and how are these states situated on the path to awakening in the traditions of yoga and meditation. I'm going to look at the more challenging experiences on the path to awakening and spontaneous Kundalini arousals, how they can be challenging as well. I'm also going to touch on the subtle body and biological mechanisms at play during Kundalini. So to my research or my information that I'm giving you today is based on Yogic and Buddhist and Tantric manuscripts from India and Tibet. Also commentaries on the manuscripts. Normally around a scripture, there would be a lot of people who would write commentaries around the scripture, practitioners who relay their phenomenological experiences. I also do a lot of phenomenological research. So my research is interpretive, where I interview individuals who have had spontaneous Kundalini experiences, as well as long-term meditators. I also study meditation manuals. So these would be more for advanced practitioners when they enter into a long retreat. So this is very typical in the Theravadan tradition. The senior monk would relay some of the journey as the meditator would go through their experiences of insight. I'm also going to share with you some neuroscience. So I'm a fledgling at this, so I apologize in advance. Okay, let's begin. So these are some of the texts I'm going to be sharing with you. They go back as far as the 8th century BCE. So these are all from different traditions. However, the phenomenology, the experience explained and described in the text within these traditions are very similar. They map onto each other. These traditions, so throughout history, we see an appropriation of knowledge across these traditions all the time. So we're talking about the nature of reality. These are just maps. These are just frameworks that have built up around natural experiences. So I'm going to touch on some of these, mainly Buddhist, but I'm going to go look into the Tantra and the Yogic as well. So that would be around the 6th to the 10th century. But I am going to focus on the Buddhist path. So that's as far back as 2nd century BCE. So these paths highlight different aspects of the experience. I'm going to demonstrate or show to you some of these, explain even some of these experiences. So they might be electricity moving through the body. They might be spontaneous kriyas or jerky movements, which after refinement turn into mudras. Spontaneous Tai Chi movements, complete devotion to something, drunk on bliss. Talking in tongues. Sometimes people wake up in the middle of the night in a yoga asana. People have experiences of the breath moving around the body, really distinct experience of prana moving around the body. Altered states of consciousness as in actually going into a different dimension, seeing chakras, nadis, all of these things. And that's only to name a few. And of course, we've got the classic fire up the spine, and this can be experienced like a whirlwind or a vortex. It can be subtle, or it can be like a flamethrower. It manifests in all sorts of different ways, and this is very dependent on the perspective of the experiencer. So these experiences are very important. They change the psychology of the individual through direct experience towards psychic wholeness. So sometimes these experiences can be quite alarming, which can leave the person or the individual quite distressed if they don't have any context for this, or the insight isn't deep enough to understand what's happening naturally. So, and this is the problem, our current models of wellness work towards creating a human which is balanced and can manage themselves in our social world, in our society. The path to enlightenment in the Eastern context is very different to our Western models of wellness. So issues can arise when we adopt Eastern traditions of enlightenment for general well-being. So some of the practices can be a catalyst for drastic psychological transformation, which don't correlate to our Western models of wellness. The spontaneous Kundalini experience very much fits onto these models or maps of enlightenment in the Eastern traditions. So these maps provide a path, a means to navigate this experience, take it to its full potential. So this psychological transformation results in liberation. So when I talk about liberation, I'm going to talk about it in the Buddhist context because this fits into my talk. I'm not religious. I don't adhere to a particular tradition, but I love these maps, and I'm so grateful for these incredible masters like the Buddha, who left us a very succinct, clear map. So to him, liberation was no more fear, no more doubt, no more anger, no more hate to ever arise again. So this is complete cessation of suffering, freedom from the bondage of the suffering process which arises as a result of certain cognitive functions. I'm going to talk about this and how these alternate states of consciousness transform, permanently change the psychology. Now, in a spontaneous Kundalini experience, we can't sometimes control what's happening. It's too strong or it's too much. And often people talk about not hindering the process because it's a natural process and it happens the way it should. But sometimes this can be partial, so we don't see its full fruition. So these experiences often indicate that there's an innate intelligence happening here, and it's taking the individual through an enlightening process. I'm going to briefly describe what this is. So now the enlightenment is the art of investigation through direct experience. From the ancients, they were always trying to understand what was the warp and the weft of the fabric of the universe. How did we come into manifestation and how do we return to the source? So Kundalini is the mechanism in the body which allows the practitioner to dissolve back from the physical plane back into its source of manifestation. The method through which one achieves this state is through stilling the mind. This is the main theme in most traditions of meditation and yoga. So here we have these 5 sheets. This is from the Taittiriya Upanishads, which is 6th century BCE. So we already have an awareness of the subtle body. This artist is Alex Gray. Thank you, Thornton, for introducing this artist. He is absolutely fantastic in his visionary expression of the subtle bodies. So just as a kind of very quick view of what the Tantric's worldview was that Kundalini is Prakriti. Prakriti is all of the manifest universe, everything that is thought, everything that is matter. Its vibratory experience is Kundalini itself. Prakriti is otherwise known as. Prana, or this life force, is the fabric through which Kundalini unfolds and manifests herself into various forms. So our body is actually made up of interpenetrating layers of Prakriti, from the most subtle to the most gross. And the most subtle layers are able to penetrate all of these layers. The most gross, being our physical body, is stable and it exists on one plane of existence, but each affects the other and provides a function for the human being to exist in a multidimensional form, as we've heard earlier. So the Pancha Koshas, the 5 koshas, this is very Vedic, it comes from Vedanta, yet these ideas filter into other traditions. And the Tantrics have a take on, or have evolved this idea, particularly with the Pranamaya Kosha, the pranic body. And I'm going to talk about that now. So the nadis, what are they? So in order for Kundalini to flow without obstruction, the nadis need to be purified. So the body is becoming more condensed. It's not solid yet. It's just channels or rivers of energy. They can move, they can change. And the idea is to make these channels clear, free from defilements. Defilement is a thought. So normally prana moves through these nadis, and thought forms or impressions of thought ride these pranic winds through these channels. This is what is meant by impure channels in the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. They call them sem. And they ride the lung. So this would be thoughts that ride the pranic rivers. So mental activity and the physical body are very, very closely connected. So I'll give you an example of how this works. When you look at an object, the nadis from your eye to the cognitive centers will be receiving that pranic imprint, and that is what will move around in your system depending on the reaction you have to that imprint. That's how big that impression will be in your pranic system. So the idea is to smooth out this body. I want to talk about the Amrita Siddhi. This is a very important text because it's yogic, it's tantric, and it's Buddhist. It crosses over into all these three traditions. There are three substances I want to talk about, well, mainly two actually, bindu and rajas. Now these pervade the body in a particular way. Of the nadis, the three most important, Pingala, the right solar channel, Ida, the left lunar channel. Now, the brain secretes bindu throughout the body. This is some kind of nectar or elixir, and it activates and it animates the body. It rides the pranic winds in the subtle body, and this is what nourishes the body. Our solar energy originating from our belly consumes this bindu. So this is when we interact in the outside world, when our sensory organs are alight with imprints, our solar energy is consuming bindu. So this happens all the time. This causes aging and decay and death. So this text describes bindu and prana and the mind as united. They move together. So when the mind stops, prana stops, and bindu move into the central channel. So the mind, the breath, everything moves into the central channel, like a turtle withdrawing its limbs. This is what's called pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. Very much like the autonomic nervous system. We have Pingala, the digestive parasympathetic nervous system, and Ida, the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. So noradrenaline might be this bindu, but we have to wait and see. So when these systems are in balance, the mind is calm and centered. So when they are profoundly calm and centered, then bindu does move into the central channel, into Sushumna Nadi. This is from the Shiva Samhita. And if we're lucky, it moves into Brahma Nadi, and this is where we get the dissolution. That's the most central column within Sushumna. There are layers to this. When it moves into the central column, you get full dissolution. So this spontaneous Kundalini can be triggered by prana moving into the central channel, pratyahara, caused by a number of experiences. So this could be an intense emotion, a withdrawal happens quickly, shock, trauma, heightened experiences. Can be a shaktipat, someone just beams the love at you and away you go. Yoga, meditation, abandonment of life habits, so a sudden change in lifestyle, break all your behavior patterns, and then there's a freedom that happens with the energy channels. Mind-altering drugs, this causes a disassociation with normal conditions. Temporal lobe epilepsy, that can also trigger these experiences. And certain personality types are prone to these experiences. So someone who's easily detached, someone prone to fantasy proneness or absorption. These are personality types who are more likely to have these experiences, according to Grayson. I want to talk about Jhana. Now, Jhana is the withdrawal of prana from the body into the central channel. This is Buddhist. So this is from the Mahasachaka Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya. This is from the Pali Canon, which talk about the practices that the Buddha taught. Jhana is the root verb is jayati. It means to burn up. So what's actually happening is we are burning up our karma, burning up the dross in our system when Kundalini enters into the central channel. We get to this state with access concentration. So I'm using the map of the early Buddhists. Like I said, there are many, but I like this because it's so succinct and it's precise, and you follow the map, you get to where it tells you to go, which is extraordinary. So access concentration. This is applied thought and sustained thought. So you are applying your thought to an object evenly, with a light mind, with a soft, gentle mind, and you're keeping it steady. So that this should be light and steady and effortless. When you're able to keep your mind placed on one object evenly and steady for a long amount of time, you enter into a state called access concentration. The breath slows down almost to a stop. The body becomes very still. Thoughts are nearly gone. The mind focuses in a continuous stream. And this is where we tip into the first jhana. I want to share with you some really fascinating research by Lee Brassington, who is a jhana teacher and is able to enter into these states quite easily. Now, the thing with jhana is that your external sensory perception is completely shut off. So you can study these in an MRI scanner, which is noisy and difficult to meditate in. But fortunately for this type of samadhi, the outside world doesn't seem to affect you. So this case study, they were able to see the parts of the brain that were highlighted when Lee Brassington went into these various states of jhana. So they're able to measure biochemically or what was happening in the brain when he went through these 4 jhanas. What we've got is a self-stimulating reward system that happens. So that means there's no external stimulation for this flood of dopamine to move through the system. As you move through each jhana, the parts of the brain which deal with fight or flight, language, or complex behaviors start to shut down. So these centers shut down as a result of concentration without stress. The concentration triggers the dopamine reward system. The brain causes a flood of opioids throughout the whole system. And this is triggered by focusing on the pleasure of concentration. You create a feedback loop where you continue to stimulate the reward system. So it's fed by focusing on awareness itself. Now this dopamine, it breaks down into norepinephrine. So this is a chemical that gets you ready for fight or flight, but you've got opioids flooding your system and norepinephrine flooding your system. So you get this intense shaking and rapture and pleasure at the same time, stimulated by nothing but awareness. So you get this heat as well. The shaking, the muscles, this rapture, is the jhana burning up the muscle tension. So the mind is purifying the body through the jhana. Fight or flight centers have shut down and the body is saturated with bliss. So the good thing about this bliss is it's non-addictive. There's no external thing to get attached to other than awareness. So we move through the second jhana, it gets less intense. The opioids are starting to run out of the system. You focus on joy, and that moves you into the second jhana. What we're doing is we're cultivating laser beam attention. So your attention is getting more intense. You are becoming still and calm as the opioids leave the system. You move into the third jhana and your body becomes more calm and more still, but more focused, hypervigilant. We're starting to get equanimous, still, steady. The amygdala is very quiet. This is the place that processes fearful or threatening stimuli. So you're really safe. You feel really safe in this place. The emotions go offline. Concentration is much more subtle, much more fine. So we're sharpening our tools to see the nature of reality here. The body and the mind are very still, no more thought at all. And this is where we get into the fourth jhana, complete equanimity. When I was doing phenomenological research, I was interviewing people who were able to enter into these states, and they were talking about the fourth jhana like as if dropping to the bottom of the ocean and feeling completely solid, like nothing can budge your attention. Absolutely focused, no emotion, no thought. And this is where we need to get to analyze the nature of reality. What happens here is your other senses of perception are confusing your ability to see, really see how things are. The fourth jhana is where we get siddhi as well, like superpowers. People report seeing their past lives like a stream of consciousness and their future lives as well. Reading other people's minds. You know, we don't have our own mind blocking this awareness. And now we need this jhana very much to access different states. You're still in your body at this stage and you're able to direct your attention to various things to observe, like sensations in the body. infinity of space, infinity of consciousness, no thing, neither perception or non-perception or cessation, they are out of body. So you're moving into completely other dimensions with the devas, the deities, disincarnate entities. So you can't really analyze the body then. Now, the Buddha was a master, well, before he became a Buddha, was a master at these samadhi techniques. But he discovered when he came out of these states, the cognitive processes continued and the suffering, the mental suffering, started up again, although it's reduced by the burning up of all the stress, but suffering continued. So he felt like this isn't it, this is not enlightenment. There's more, there's got to be more to end suffering completely. So he started to analyze the nature of our being to see what is going on in there. And he did this through analyzing sensate experiences in the body. This was the object of concentration here. I want to talk about insight. Now, what we see in insight are dhammas. This is from the Abhidhamma, the third book of the Pali Canon, which was the council of enlightened monks who got together after the Buddha passed away and compared their phenomenological notes after they became arahants or enlightened beings. So dhammas are mental thoughts and physical forms. So all of our reality is made from the same substance. They are the tiniest building blocks that arise and pass away each second, and they constitute our phenomenological reality. So delusion is the misidentification with these building blocks, thinking that we are all this one being, where in fact we are just these experiences arising and passing away multiple times as millisecond. And this is what people in deep jhana experience in the body and the nature of our reality. So here are some texts. Now, these texts explain what happens when you start to analyze the nature of reality. These texts explain what happens when you start to see the body dissolve. And this changes your psychology massively. This is an intellectual, this is direct experience. So this is as old as the 2nd century. So these stages or insight knowledges are mapped out like linear stages as you go through insight practice. But when you have a spontaneous Kundalini experiences, the prana moves into the central channel, you're activating a level of insight. This doesn't necessarily happen in a linear fashion. However, I'll talk about this as if in a linear fashion. These are the texts that describe these insight knowledges. So we've known about them for a while. These below are the modern day Vipassana teachers. So there are texts by these teachers who explain these experientially. I want to talk to you particularly about four of these stages: arising and passing away, knowledge of suffering, disillusion, fear, misery, disgust, desire for deliverance, and reobservation. They're important. I mean, they're all important, but these ones seem to come up in a big way with spontaneous Kundalini arousals. And are very important in changing the psychology of the individual. So when you experience the dhammas firsthand, your psychology is changed. And the more you go, the deeper you go into this experience, the more permanent your psychology is changed. So the view of the personality starts to fall away. You realize you're just separate components which make up the human being. This comes very clear, very distinct. So the mechanisms of consciousness get broken down. So you can see the mechanics of thought and emotion and sensation happening in the body. So jhana would be a preliminary practice because you need the laser beam concentration. And it prepares you for more challenging insights because you've released the trauma from your system. However, these days people launch into mindfulness practices to feel good, and they start to see these dharmas arising and passing away, and it's a shock because your body starts to dissolve if you're really good at it. Now, I want to talk about arising and passing. This stage of insight is where all the Kundalini stuff happens. You see the chakras, you see the nadis, you can manipulate the nadis with your mind, send prana through them. You can see a light glowing out the body, or the siddhi arrive and pass. These are experiencing more close up and personal the nature of your subtle layers of your being. People can get manic phases or grandiosity, inspiration. They want to write or read scripture or read profound texts. They understand deep poetry. You can also feel quite raw during these experiences. But what we're doing is we're looking at how these experiences arise in the body and how they pass away. Now, in the Buddhist context, in this path, they talk about 10 corruptions of insight. This stage is potentially a dangerous stage because people are having very profound experiences, and they call this impurities of or corruptions of insight, because sometimes impurities arise to the surface, like pride or arrogance or things like that. So it's very important just to sit back and watch it all happen, not get attached to these processes, although they are important in and of themselves, yet they are not to identify with as a human being. Daniel Ingram, I'm aware of the time. Daniel Ingram is a interesting character who wrote a book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, and we see most of the energetic phenomena in his research as well happens at the arising and passing away stage. What happens next is the disillusion, fear, misery, and disgust stage. It's not a very nice title for this process, but it kind of maybe isn't really a good experience. However, it is really important in the enlightening process. So sometimes referred to as the dark night of the soul. This process is about a release of the heart. So you're experiencing disillusion. You're experiencing the whole body dissolve into nothing. So when you're staring into the void and the void is staring back at you, this can be terrifying. You have no ground of being. There is nothing that is you. People report everything they look at just dissolves. Everything they experience just dissolves. The mind can get very dull at this stage. Monks throw their robes in at this stage quite a lot because they feel like they've not able to move forwards through this stage. It's very deep, it's very dark, but it's knowledge of suffering. It's learning, understanding what are the things that bind you to this reality? What are the ways we get tangled up in this fabric of our existence? So you're really examining this process. It's very hard, it's very difficult. But we need this experience. We need this experience to untether ourselves. So this is what I mean by these models of enlightenment not really fitting onto wellness models. You are unattaching yourself from human love so that you can have Buddha love, which is for everyone indiscriminately. When you don't have these human attachments, that kind of love just pours out of you for everyone, no matter who they are. So this is the process. This is very important. You're understanding suffering, you're understanding compassion. It turns into re-observation. So you develop this desire for deliverance, get back into the practice, this effort, new effort arises. So I just wanted to talk about some of the preliminary practices and some of the experiences as well. Now, monks would meditate on death. Our culture doesn't really, it's kind of taboo, death is, but no one's getting out of here alive. So it's something that maybe we should meditate on, maybe we should come to peace with. This would help us live more presently. And especially loving kindness, metta bhavana, especially in most traditions, this is one of the most important preliminary practices. You are preparing the ego for ego death. These practices are designed to prepare you for the dark night of the soul, to prepare you for Kundalini. And now this happens in sometimes a jumbled up order or suddenly. So it is advisable to go and practice loving kindness for the self, get the ego into a safe place, get the trauma out of the system, look at the issues that we carry with us. And it's normal and it's okay. There's nothing to hide behind this. We're human. This is what happens, it's what the mind does. But yes, it's really important to prepare the mind. And if you're going through this experience, then that kind of compassion for yourself is really important to change the psychology so that letting go is easier.